This question comes from Ricky Ricardo. He says, do you believe this is the best receiver group in the Ryan Tannehill era? I guess you're referring to Ryan Tannehill saying this is the best offense he's ever played on. So let's go through every single receiver group that Tannehill has ever had since the 2012 season. A little trip down memory lane. This is going to be a long topic probably, so hold your dang horses. And I might get some of these wrong because it's been a while. Since obviously 2012. It's been a very, very long time. So I blame you guys for this, for putting me on the spot. Thank you, everybody. So the first roster is very interesting, and just to kind of, not to get off topic here, but I think if we ever did a top 10 Dolphins rookie seasons ever, I think Tannehill would make that list. I think Tannehill would make the top 10 rookie seasons a Dolphin has ever had. Top 10 rookie seasons, not all time, but, you know, Dolphins rookie seasons. I think he would make that list. I think he had a very underrated season. He broke Dan Marino's rookie record in that Seattle Seahawks game. Very iconic in my mind. It'll always be in my memory when those sprinklers came on against the Seattle Seahawks, which ended up being a fourth quarter comeback for Ryan Tannehill. Game-winning drive at that. So this was a great year. It was an interesting, even though we didn't win games, we went 7-9. See, I'm getting nostalgic now. So this was probably the worst. This is probably the worst roster in the Ryan Tannehill era in terms of talent around him. We had Devon Best, who was he was a really good slot receiver. He almost went over 1,000 yards, or hit 1,000 yards, excuse me. He had 900 yards, so he barely missed it. Him and Tannehill had a really, really, really good chemistry. I wish they could have played together. I wish they could have played together longer because they did have really good chemistry. And Devon Best, really smart receiver, really quick, really fun to watch after the catch. So Devon Best, Then we go to Brian Hartline, who I think that was his first season having 1,000 yards. So he had a breakout year. His most notable game that year probably against the Arizona Cardinals. That was a really fun game where Tannehill, I think still that's his best in terms of yardage. He had 400-something yards passing that game. The reason why this is probably one of the best rookie seasons a Dolphin has ever had. And then you look at tight end situation. We had Anthony Fasano, and I'm going to count Charles Clay, even though he started at fullback that season. And at running back we had Reggie Bush, who really gave us a receiving threat. Him and Tannehill had really good chemistry. I think the most notable game they had was against the Buffalo Bills, where Tannehill threw 3 touchdowns to Reggie Bush in that game. So overall, this is probably the worst. Actually, it's not probably. It is the worst receiver core Tannehill has ever had. So comparing it to the 2017 season, it's no contest at all. It's just not even close. So moving on to the 2013 season, Mr. Stephen Ross and the Miami Dolphins front office really put an emphasis on surrounding Tannehill with talent. Devon Best leaves for greener pastures. He leaves for the Cleveland Browns, and in hindsight ended up being a good move because Devon Best really never was healthy again. With we bring in new people like Mike Wallace, who Tannehill and him really never had the chemistry together, and I think Mike Wallace was a locker room problem. So we had Mike Wallace. This is the 2013 roster. We had Mike Wallace. Then we still have Brian Hartline. I think that was the year we gave him his extension because he's coming off that 1,000-yard receiving season. So we have Mike Wallace, and there might have been 2014. No, I think this is 2013. So Mike Wallace, Brian Hartline. Then we get the kid from St. Louis, Brandon Gibson, who actually balled on us pretty hard. He had one of the greatest catches I've ever seen in NFL history, one-handed grab while going out of bounds. So we had Brandon Gibson, who was a pretty dang good slot receiver at the time. And Charles Clay, this was the year Charles Clay really had his breakout season at tight end. Anthony Fasano obviously leaves for the Kansas City Chiefs. So, Charles Clay gets the nod there. And I think behind him he had like Michael Agnew, who we were still hoping was going to turn into something, one of the biggest draft. Well, not busts, but he was a bust, and I guess technically, even though he was a later round pick. Group doesn't compare to the 2017 roster at all. The receivers were not. Tannehill never really had chemistry with them. Mike Wallace, obviously infamous. Mike Wallace and Tannehill connection never really got on page, not just with the deep ball, but in anything in general. Mike Wallace was a prima donna receiver. He thought he was all that after getting that big deal, and never really took the game seriously, I feel like. So this group, and obviously at running back, getting his first start was Lamar Miller. So Lamar Miller really wasn't in his prime yet. That was his first year really starting at running back. So this roster doesn't even compare to the 2017 roster at all either. I feel like there was a whole lot of new faces that really didn't pan out, and never really had chemistry other than Brian Hartline maybe and Charles Clay. Those are the 2 best weapons on the team. So comparing that to the 2017 roster, no contest. 2014 roster. 2014 roster, I feel like probably you could make an argument that this is probably the second best roster of talent that Tannehill has ever had. This is where Tannehill threw for, I think, a career high 27 touchdowns that year. It was Bill Lazor's first year as head coach, or not head coach, as offensive coordinator. We just got rid of Mike Sherman. So I'm telling you, man, we're going down memory lane here. And so Tannehill, so this roster I think consisted of Brian Hartline was back. I think this is really the downfall of Brian Hartline, to be honest. So Brian Hartline, same roster really. Brian Hartline, Brandon Gibson, Mike Wallace. The only new addition to the team was Jarvis Landry. Obviously, this was Juice's rookie season, who really didn't start catching fire till later. Again, not in his prime yet, so you have to consider that. This was not Jarvis Landry's prime. This is his first year in the league. And Rashard Matthews was sprinkled in here and there. This was the first time we were really hearing Rashard Matthews' name. The other time, really, I guess, was 2013. He made some big catches against the New England Patriots. So we're starting to really hear Rashard Matthews. Mike Wallace still on the team. I think this was the year he had like 10. He had 9 receivers. I think he had 10 touchdowns actually. So this was the best year Mike Wallace has ever had. So really, collectively, Tannehill had chemistry. This was his second year with Mike Wallace. This was his third year with Brian Hartline, basically. So he had chemistry, and Jarvis Landry, obviously the rookie sensation that he was, really started making plays towards the end of the season. Really started to come into his own shell. He was making plays really the entire season, to be honest with you. So that was, and Lamar Miller. Really, this is probably one of This is Lamar's second best season as a Dolphin, I would say. So this is Lamar Miller's prime. Obviously, Charles Clay really came on this year as one of the best tight ends in the league. So you could make an argument this is probably the second best roster, just because there is talent on the team. Not a lot of it. There was still not really a dominant outside receiver. There was not a real true number one receiver on this team. That's for sure. There was not a number one receiver on this team. The best threat we had was Charles Clay by far. So Tannehill, again, never really had the greatest offensive roster around him. So I guess you can make an argument this is probably the second best he's ever had, the 2017 season. So let's move on. What are we on? So 2015 season. I'm losing my train of thought here. The 2015 season was a disaster. We trade for Kenny Still. We get rid of Brian Hartline. He's out the door. We get rid of Charles Clay. He goes to Buffalo. We get rid of who else? Brian Hartline's gone. Brandon Gibson's gone. I think he moves on to New England. This is really the youth movement. This is really what's the Dolphins' future, basically. The first year, none of them were in their primes yet, especially since they were coming into a new system that ended up not really being their system of the future anyway. The whole Dan Campbell, Joe Philbin debacle that we finally got Joe Philbin out of Miami. So we bring in Devontae Parker, first round pick. Out of Louisville. So we got DP's the new addition. Jarvis Landry really is hitting his prime. This is when Jarvis Landry was really coming onto the scene. He hadn't really like put everybody on notice. I think that was he made the top 100 I think in the 90s that year. So I guess he was really hitting his stride, really getting to his prime. So Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry, Kenny Stills, we get in a trade in New Orleans. So we really get rid of all of the fat on the team's roster. And at running back, we still have Lamar Miller, even though we drafted a kid out of Boise who was definitely, it's really took him a year, obviously, to become what he was in J.H.I. So this roster, especially at the tight end position, we go over to Cleveland and we get Cameron. That didn't work out at all. So this is probably one of the worst ones. I think 2013 probably was the worst. Or not the worst, but second to worst not in terms of receiver core, but in offense in general, because the offensive line of 2013 was terrible. But the 2015 year, again, to quick rundown: Kenny, DP, Juice, not Charles. Obviously, Charles Clay went to Buffalo. Jordan Cameron, Lamar Miller's last year, and then J.J. backing him up. So it was overall, I want to say one of the worst. In terms of chemistry, it was one of the worst. In terms of talent, none of them were in their primes yet. They were all young. So this was one of the worst receiver cores Tannehill's ever dealt with. I'd probably say this was second to last because of everybody was young. They really didn't know what they were doing. That, and they had like two different crapping offensive playbooks thrown at them. So this is one of the worst years that Tannehill as an offense collectively has had. So the 2016 roster, this is when stuff starts popping. This is when chemistry starts. This is when people are hitting their primes. This is when Adam Gase comes in, changes the culture. Everybody is really on the same page. So this, you can make an argument this is probably the best Tannehill has ever had. In terms of results, this is the best Tannehill has ever had. Jarvis Landry in his prime, straight up in his prime. The best, there's no doubt in anybody's mind who the best slot receiver in the game is. It's Jarvis Juice Landry. Then Devontae Parker, even though really still wasn't consistent, still inconsistent, really in year 2, hits not his prime. I think 2017 is going to be the definition of his prime, but still, still put up really good numbers, 700 yards receiving. Kenny Stills, 9 receiving touchdowns, the big play threat. So many big plays that season. Not just deep ball touchdowns, but he made big catches in both Steelers games. So Kenny Stills really hitting his prime in Miami. Really getting Tannehill to Kenny Stills chemistry was on point this season. And then Jay Ajayi became the superstar that Jay Ajayi is now as a top 5 running back in this league. So this is definitely the best in terms of what we've seen so far. The best talent Tannehill has had up until this point. And the tight end position was he has no tight end. Jordan Cameron can't stay healthy. He's constantly banged up, and behind him there's nothing. So moving now, we finally get to the 2017 roster. I feel like Devontae Parker is a true number 1. This is the finally we're gonna get a I'm not going to say number 1 receiver because Jarvis Landry is a great receiver, but a true, and we're going to get deep NFL analogies into this, a true number 1 outside beast in Devontae Parker. I think this is the first time Tannehill has ever had that or anything close to it. I think Devontae Parker, barring, hopefully, God, please don't let him get injured, Devontae Parker is going to be that guy. Jarvis Landry is in his prime. This is the definition of Juice Landry. He is the best slot receiver in the game. He is on top of his game. Jarvis Landry, one of the best running after the catch receivers. Kenny Stills, in his prime. One of the best deep threats in the game. One of the best averages to catch in the game. One of the best deep threats in the game. Kenny Stills. Fins up. And then obviously Jay Ajayi, in his prime. This is the 2017 roster. Beast in the booth. Jay Ajayi, top 5 running back in the game. So I'm getting crapping excited even talking about it. And then obviously we go out and we get Julius Thomas in a trade, who is an absolute, if he can stay healthy, a beast. And behind him we have depth in Anthony Fasano. So this roster, combined with everybody just really hitting their stride, we're really seeing if this is the future, this is the building block, this team is going to be deadly. This is one of the best young offensive nucleuses in the AFC and in the NFL, in my opinion. And that's not being biased, because I haven't said that about any of those other rosters. The difference between all of those rosters and this roster is they're young, they're 24 and crapping up, they're in their primes, Jay Ajayi's top 5 back in the league. We have the best slot receiver. We're going to have another top 10 receiver in the NFL in Devontae Parker. We have one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. And then we have Kenny Stills, who's one of the best big play receivers in the league. And we have Julius Thomas at tight end, who can line up in the slot, who can do all those things that a hybrid tight end can do, who's basically a receiver. So 2017, in terms of depth, at the receiver core, it's not even close. And everybody behind everybody is going to be entering year 2. They should take off as well. At the running back position, depth, not even close. I mean, it's not even close. Daniel Thomas, Lamar Miller, and Reggie Bush don't even come close to Jay Ajayi, Kenyon Drake, and Devon Smith or Damian Williams, whoever you want to put there. So none of those guys even come close. So this is by far the best offensive skill position nucleus that Tannehill has ever had. So yes, I do agree with Tannehill. I think it's not even close. I don't even think you can make an argument for any of those rosters competing with this particular one. This question comes from Ronald. He says, who did you want Miami to draft as the board started to fall and got to the Lions? Pick in your head, who did you go, man, here we go, who do we need? Me, my guy was Malik McDowell after trading down with the Browns to get a few more picks. I never was a Malik McDowell guy because I thought he was so much potential and not enough substance. Is the best way I can put it. So I never was a Malik McDowell guy. But the guy that I really wanted, and I can't even lie, and I know most Dolphins fans, this is very common, I think. I wanted Reuben Foster. We have been struggling with linebackers for many, many years. It's been, it's been so long since we've had a really, really good linebacker core, and not a lot of it has, to do with the talent that we assembled. A lot of it had to do with injuries, and we just never got depth on the linebacker core. You guys have heard the rigmarole. You guys have heard me talk about it before. So the guy that I really, 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 really wanted was Reuben Foster. I really, really wanted Reuben Foster. I thought he was the best linebacker in the draft. I thought he had the most talent, even though people question his leadership qualities and where his mindset was going into the NFL. I thought it was another Tyrann Mathieu situation. I thought this guy is the next great Alabama prospect, the next great Alabama player, and I thought he was going to be that guy. I mean, there's been some great linebackers coming out of Alabama, whether that be Reggie Ragland or C.J. Mosley or Dante Hightower. All of those guys were great, but I don't think any of them had the talent that Reuben Foster had. So I was really, really excited, and he was gonna fall to us. I actually had. There is a mock draft on my channel if you've never seen it, where I did a mock draft specifically because just to see what would happen or what had to happen for us to get Reuben Foster. That's how much I really, really, really wanted him. And when he was there, with where we had the 22nd overall pick, I was like, please select Reuben Foster. I was chanting Reuben Foster, even though in the back of my head I knew who we were going to pick because of all the reports about Charles Harris. So in hindsight, we got a really good pass rusher. We needed a defensive end, but the guy that I really, really liked, there was two guys that I really liked in that draft, and that was Hassan Reddick, and that was Reuben Foster. Those were the two guys I really, really liked, and Hassan Reddick got picked by the Cardinals. He was gone. He went a lot higher than I thought he was going to go. And then Reuben Foster, we passed on for Charles Harris. And again, in hindsight, Charles Harris has been a great player so far in the building. I'm not hating on Charles Harris. I love that pick. I still really, really like that pick a lot because I think he really helps a lot of the issues that we've had on our defense for a very, very long time. Either way, we could have won because the draft was so deep at defensive end. There's so many great pass rushers in that draft that are going to be great pass rushers, and we got one of them. We got one of the best. So it's not like I'm not happy with the pick, but I really wanted Reuben Foster, and we ended up getting Raekwon McMillan. I was worried there I thought we weren't going to pick a linebacker, and I was going to be really upset, but we ended up getting a great linebacker in the second round anyway. But the guy that I really, really wanted, that I didn't think we could even get our hands on, was Reuben Foster. I thought he was that guy. This question comes from William Ray. He says, now that tight end Julius Thomas is on the team, do you think the offense should line up in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets with Julius in the slot and tight end Anthony Visano at the tight end spot, like the Colts used to do during Peyton Manning's time, Dallas Clark and Fletcher, especially during a no-huddle offense? Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of that. It's unfortunate that we didn't get to see more of that. We had a really, when Jordan Cameron got hurt, we had really traditional tight ends that just could not do that. They were very much hand-in-the-dirt tight ends with Dominique Jones and Marquise Gray. The most non-traditional tight end we had on the team still was Thomas Durante, who we selected in the 7th round, who was not up to the physical task of being a tight end at that point in his career yet. So we just didn't have anybody to do it. But I think a good example of that was the preseason game against the Dallas Cowboys, where you saw Jordan Cameron line up like that against the Cowboys. He ended up dropping he actually dropped 2 touchdowns in the red zone at that set. But yeah, I think you're going to see a lot of that this upcoming season, especially in key downs like 3rd down in the red zone. It presents a lot of it presents a real matchup problem with your tight end. And Adam Gase is infamous. He's famous for doing that with tight ends, of lining them up in untraditional spots, lining them up on the outside receiver position, anything like that Adam Gase has done before. So like I said, tight ends are so very, very important to his offense. So yeah, I would definitely expect some of that stuff to happen, especially in the red zone, on key situations like 3rd down. And Julius Thomas has done that throughout his whole career. He's really, 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 really good at it. He did that in Jacksonville. So yeah, I can't wait to see that. I think it's going to be really fun to watch, especially since, I can't wait to finally we have a number 1 tight end on the team, as long as he can stay healthy. And everything we've heard so far this offseason has been good news about how good Julius Thomas is. And Tannehill talked about it in that interview when he said this is the best offense he's ever played on, of how smart Julius Thomas is. But not only is he so smart and he knows the offense like the back of his hand, he's also a super athletic freak. So, and if people forget, Julius Thomas is still in his prime. He's only 28 years old. He's like smack dab right in his prime. So I can't wait to see him play. And yes, I definitely would expect to see that kind of formation a lot this upcoming season. So for the first time in Miami Dolphins fan Q&A history, two people basically asked the same question, so I'm going to answer them because they're both really good questions. So Sean Jacobson says, which game is the most important and why? I say Dolphins versus Bucks because it will pave the path down the road for us if we win. And the next question comes from Steven606. He says, what game are you most excited / nervous for and why? So this is the same answer to the question, right? The two games that I think the games that I think are most important, there actually are four of them, and they're both, I think one of them's in November, and then the rest of them are in December. The two Buffalo Bills games in December, I think those are big games. I think, over the years, but the Buffalo Bills have bothered us, to say the least. And Tannehill has always struggled away at Buffalo. He's never won a game there, ever, in his career. I think he's only won 2 games in Sun Life Stadium or / Hard Rock Stadium now against the Buffalo Bills at home in his 6-year career down here. So he's always struggled against the Buffalo Bills, and that's going to be really pushing it to get into the playoffs. I don't know. I can't predict what our record is going to be at that point, but if we're in the playoff race, those are 2 big games against division AFC opponents that we need to win, especially in the AFC East. So those are 2 games on the road in Buffalo, and then the last game of the season is going to be at home against the Buffalo Bills. So those have huge playoff implications, huge AFC East implications. So those 2 games I'm not nervous for, but I think those are very, very important that we need to take care of business in both of those games. And then again, obviously, I think the games that I'm most nervous for is probably the New England Patriots. Both games are late in the year. One of them is going to be in November, and then the other one's going to be in December. So both of those games are going to be very, very important. To AFC East implications and to the AFC playoffs in general. Not saying that we have to beat the Patriots to get into the playoffs. I think that's more along the lines of the Bills games. But those are going to be interesting games. I think I think those are going to be measuring stick games, like how much have you improved, and the Gillette game in Gillette really has a chance to be a culture shock to Dolphins, well, not Dolphins fans, but like just the entire world, really. If we beat the Patriots in Gillette, I think everybody's gonna be like, man, the Dolphins are for real. I think that's the game that if we win that game, I think that is the game to prove it to everybody of how legit our team is. So we have a really, really, really amazing opportunity to do that in Gillette Stadium. So those are the games that I think are the most important of the 2017 season. This question comes from Jonathan Diaz. He says, who do you think will start at nickel corner? We are solid on the outside with Maxwell, Lippett, and Howard, but the slot is what worries me. With names like Bobby McCain, Michael Thomas, and Cordrea Tankersley, who do you think will end up winning the job? The guy that I think seriously is going to surprise a bunch of people and has surprised me so far this offseason is Cordrea Tankersley. He's got a lot of work at the slot corner position, I think a whole lot more than anybody else thought he would. He has the athleticism to play at that position. He has the physical nature that it takes to play at that position. He's a very physical outside corner, but he sucks at tackling. He's not a great tackler. That's the only thing I would be worried about is him in the slot corner role, because it's a very demanding position. Not only do you have to be a really good cover guy, but you have to be able to tackle, because most guys that are going across the middle are slot receivers. You might take on a tight end at some point. So those guys are quick and really make their money at being a rack receiver. Those guys make their money about being quick, making a move in the open field, and getting yards after the catch. So that's what really concerns me when I think of Cordrea. I need to see him play in a preseason game to really decide, has he improved his tackling at that level that you need to be at to play the slot corner role. But other than Cordrea, I think Michael Thomas is another guy that everybody has to keep their eye on. I don't think Bobby McCain is going to actually he's not a clear-cut winner. But if you were asking me right now and who I would give the job to right now, if I had to pick, it would definitely be Michael Thomas. I think Michael Thomas he's not the athlete that Bobby McCain is, and he's not the athlete that Cordrea is, but he has the experience. He knows how to tackle in the open field. He's really good at that. He doesn't have the greatest coverage skills in the world. Like I said, he's not a great athlete, but he's smart and he can tackle. And I think just playing off of that and his veteran experience, I think it suits him more than it maybe does Bobby McCain or Cordrea Tankersley. But we'll see more from training camp. We'll see more from preseason who it will be. But I think right now the most prepared for it's probably Michael Thomas. This question comes from Matthew Miami 1996 and he says, do you think Miami should sign Orlando Franklin to play left guard? I am hoping that Isaac Asiata can start at left guard and play well. Here's the deal. No. And it's the same reason for Nick Mangold. He cannot be counted on to be here week in, week out. And to add him for depth is really dangerous, because if he does get hurt in place of somebody like a Mike Pouncey, who we're not even sure of, that can start week 1, then what the heck are we going to do then? We can't. You just can't carry that many offensive linemen. And when you do, you got to make sure you make the right decision. So it's. I think Orlando Franklin was a liability in San Diego. I think he could not be counted on. I think he's past his prime. I don't think he's the same Orlando Franklin that he was in Denver. I really don't. I don't think he ever will be that ever again. So no, I think I just don't think we should sign somebody for past accolades. I think the league is what have you done for me lately, and I think those injuries, especially to offensive linemen at his age, is just too dangerous to go down that road. And I don't want to waste cap space and a roster spot on somebody like him. I think we got to just roll with what we have now, and Isaac Asiata, and Ted Larson, and just see where the chips fall. Because I think what we've done is add great depth on the offensive line. So if somebody did get hurt, I don't think it would be that much of a drop off. The only thing I'm really concerned about is Ted Larson, and how good he is, even though he might not even start. I think Isaac Asiata has a good chance to start at the guard position. But if he does, Ted Larson, he also has an injury history as well. He's only started 8 games last season. So I guess it wouldn't be the worst idea to bring him in for a visit to see where he is at this point. But he's not a priority. He's not somebody we should worried about. And I don't think we should sign him. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Hey guys, this has been the Miami Dolphins fan Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know that first topic was like 15 minutes long, but it was a very, very interesting topic. I think we're going to revisit that topic in the podcast for sure, because it's a fun thing to go through. I want to hear your guys' feedback on that. Who is the Miami Dolphins? I think we're going to rank from 1 to 5 the best skill positions Tannehill has ever been on, the best offenses Tannehill has ever been on. Give me your guys' top 5 list for the Miami Dolphins podcast. And I am SkyX283, and I will see you guys in the next one.